Afternoon. Welcome to the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commission meeting here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. We'll call this meeting to order. Thank you all for being here. And at this time, I'm going to call on Commissioner Jim Ripley to lead us in the invocation, followed by Commissioner Steve Jones, who will lead us in the pledge.
Please bow your head. Dear Heavenly Father, we pray today for all those who are in trouble, sorrow, need, sickness, or any other adversity. We pray for our men and women in the armed forces who are keeping us safe. We ask for your wisdom today, that our decisions may be pleasing to you, and that our words would be pleasing as well. For it's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Please face the flag. Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Danette, would you call the roll, please?
Dennis Gardner. Jimmy Granberry.
Here.
Steve Jones.
Here.
Connie King.
Here.
Jim Ripley.
Here.
Tony Sanders.
Here.
James Stroud. Kent Woods.
Here by Zoom.
Tommy Woods.
Here.
Hank Wright.
Here.
Angie Box.
Here.
Brian McLaren.
Here.
Kurt Holbert.
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. I'm going to call on Commissioner.
Kurt?
Yes, Commissioner Stroud.
Okay, sir, did hear me. Okay, thank you.
Gotcha. We have everyone present, wasn't it, Danette? Okay. I'm going to call on Commissioner Sanders. He has an announcement or some words anyway.
Which one do you want?
Both.
Okay, I've got to do a little bit of bragging here. On Jay McClellan, stand up. Our new engineer chief. I want to recap for the commission what happened in the last 7 days. A Facebook post, believe it or not, complaining about a boat ramp, probably one of the most popular boat ramps on Lake Chickamauga, which is the record largemouth bass holding lake in Tennessee. Anyway, not counting ones maybe you might have shocked up, but anyway, we had a ramp problem, and I called Chris using some of the funds and asked him, I said, do we have any funds available from the gas tax? And he said yes. So we got Jay on the phone, and literally Thursday, I think, is when we had the phone call. They were here Monday or Tuesday. Monday was a holiday. They were here Tuesday fixing the ramp as best we can. We can't fix it. We're going to really try to do repair later. But, I mean, in a matter of just a few hours or a few days, they mobilized, they got some equipment. We spent somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000 trying to Band-Aid this till we can get to summer pool and fix later. I mean, to see something work that quickly, I just want to say thanks, Jay. And I don't know who the guy was that you brought with you. I don't have any idea. I was going out to see them on Wednesday, and I called him on Tuesday night, and he said, "Oh, we're done. I'm back home." I'm like, "Wait a minute, you can't be done. I need to come see you," because this is literally 6 miles from my house. But I was just so impressed with how quickly that they mobilized and was able to get this done, because this is a problem that we're going to address long term. But I appreciate what you did, and he's already said we're going to have to come back a little bit later to do it again till we can get this thing fixed, but they're on it. So thank you, Jay. I really appreciate it.
All right, I'm going to ask Joe Benedict if he would. I think I've asked him to introduce a couple couple of people today. So Joe, if you want to, whichever mic you want to grab.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And they're not new people, but it's
Right. We wanted to recognize our two new program managers that have been hired for, I guess, about a month now, or maybe more. So Patrick Lemons in Region 1. Patrick's been around for a long time. And Brandon Ware, this is his neck of the woods. Many of you know him from Tellico Lake WMA. So I want to thank you guys for the opportunity to recognize them. We're excited to have them in their new roles.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks, guys, for being here. Patrick had a long drive, or this morning or yesterday one, I don't know which, but appreciate you guys coming. Director Wilson, any words of wisdom?
Not at this time, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Any announcements from any other commissioner? All right. If not, I'm going to ask, I think Stephanie Karns is going to join us by Zoom and give us an update on chronic wasting disease.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I am a new face here at TWRA, and I'm stepping in to cover for Chuck Yost to provide an update on CWD. I'm a recent transplant from Colorado. I've been with TWRA for about 11 months, working on CWD, and before that I was a biologist and an officer with Colorado Parks and Wildlife for just under 20 years. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. So before I get started, I'd like to point out that although I'm presenting and covering for Chuck, there's a lot of people that contributed to this presentation. So I just want to point out that James Kelly, Dr. Dan Grove, Chief Wisniewski, Chief Benedict, Lynn Barrett with GIS, Major Elkins, and Jeremy Dennison and all the other field staff have all contributed to this report. So all the credit to them. I'm just passing on their information. So I'll get started with a summary of the harvest for this year. So far, statewide, we have harvested just under 160,000 deer, and that's a 20% increase from the previous season. This graph that you see up here on this screen shows harvest for the last 15 seasons, from 2005 to the season that just ended. And you can see the highest was in 2008 with about 180,000 deer, and we're just under that with 160,000 deer this year. That is about a 20% increase from last year's season. So a very successful season all around. Across the state, aside from Unit CWD, we killed just under 141,000 of those 160,000 deer. That's a big increase, 16% from the previous season, and an increase also from the previous 5 seasons. So deer harvest was up across the state. Unit CWD, though, had a dramatic increase from last year in particular. Nearly 19,000 deer were harvested in Unit CWD, which is a 35% increase from the previous season, and an 8% increase from the previous 5 seasons. So things are returning a bit to normal compared to last year. There's no changes to Unit CWD in these data, and this is really a credit to the intentional work by staff to manage CWD by increasing harvest. And the agency, the commission, and the stakeholders should really be proud of these results. It's a really positive step in managing CWD effectively. So moving on specifically to CWD updates, this map shows you the current known distribution of CWD across the state. You can see in this map, there are 3 different years of positives represented. The smallest number and the lightest color are the positives from the first year. They're the smallest yellow dots you see. The slightly larger gray dots are from last year's season, and then the largest red dots are positives from this year. In addition to that, you see a pink line, a series of pink lines that form circles. That's a 10-mile radius around all of the locations. So it shows The largest extent is that 10-mile radius around the outermost positives. So some things that changed this year are a positive in Lauderdale County and also a positive over in eastern Madison County. And that did change, that changed Henderson County to a high-risk county. Lauderdale was already a high-risk county, so the only changes here are to Henderson County, which does trigger carcass transport and feeding restriction regulations in Henderson County. So this shows you the extent of the disease. This shows you it's a little cleaner representation of where the positive and high-risk counties are. The pink counties are positive counties, and that light orange color are the high-risk counties. So no major changes other than Lauderdale and Henderson. The testing results to date are quite astonishing. We sampled and tested over 18,000 deer. Of those 18,000 deer, 556 were positive. All of those were from the counties that I showed you in that most recent map. The remainder of the state provided 3,000 samples, and the majority of the animals were obviously sampled in the CWD units and counties. So no big surprises except for the incredible effort that was put forth to test those almost 19,000 deer. It's an agency record, and it's a real testament to the support and the engagement from the hunting public and the massive effort and commitment from staff. I do want to point out that 2,300 results are still pending at the labs that we're working with, so there may still be some changes. We're hoping to get those in the next couple weeks as the labs are able to clear out their backlogs and provide any confirmations that are necessary. This shows the current prevalence estimates by county. As you're accustomed to seeing, Fayette and Hardiman County by far have the highest prevalence, and are really the bulk of the positive deer that we find. We estimate that countywide in Fayette County, roughly 14% of the deer are test positive, and 9% in Hardiman County. The remaining counties that you see that are positive have very, very low prevalence. And these are areas where we have real opportunity to manage the disease and stop the spread. You can see Lauderdale is a recent positive. Chester shows up with, as a positive, it is a positive, but there were no additional positives this year. So it's represented just a little bit differently because there wasn't a positive this year. The thing to keep in mind is that these are prevalences across the county. And they can be somewhat misleading because there are definitely specific areas, particularly at the border of Fayette and Hardiman counties, that are significantly higher prevalence than the remainder of the county. So just something to keep in mind, these are countywide prevalence data. Here's some information, in case you're wondering, I'll go through this pretty quickly, about where the positives have been to date. This 556 number, that is the total number of positives that we talked about from this year. And you can see that the bulk of the positive tests come from Fayette and Hardiman County, with each of the other positive counties having very few additional positives and contributing that many to the mix. Just over 1,200 in the last 3 years. Here is, this represents the prevalence in Fayette and Hardiman counties combined over the last 3 years. And you can see over time, starting in 2018, we estimated the prevalence in the combined counties at just over 8%. In 2019, that prevalence was estimated at just 11%. And 2020 prevalence is estimated at just under 12%. Although this appears quite alarming, I want to highlight that these are not statistically significant changes over time, and we are still learning quite a bit about the disease. Excuse me. So as you see this graphic, it can be a little concerning, but make sure that you note that it's not statistically significant, and they are, again, countywide estimates. So ways that we are managing the disease, we have 2 new programs this year. The first are management permits that will allow the take of deer outside of the regular deer season. These are available to all landowners in Fayette and Hardiman counties, and also within a 3-mile radius of a positive deer in any other counties. You may have heard some people refer to these as control permits for CWD management. It's the same thing. CWD management permits. This is a wonderful opportunity to partner with landowners, and they're issued by the county wildlife officers after they determine that the properties do fall into those areas. Officers so far have issued 120 permits. There has been significant public interest and support for this program. So thank you very much to law enforcement and other field staff who have participated in this. It's been a heavy lift, and they have met the challenge for sure. So we're working to get this program up and running, but those permits are on the ground. In addition to the CWD management permits, we have started the targeted removal program. That program is a partnership with willing landowners, and we're contracting wildlife services to remove deer within a 3-mile radius of those positive animals. We have permission at this time on 8,500 acres, with 1,200 of that is private land. 17 landowners have enrolled, and we're still working with landowners daily on recruiting more partners in the program. We're also working on about 6,300 acres of public lands. Just to give you a little bit wider of a perspective, this is a small map showing current counties in the east and southeast that have positive deer. One thing I do want to highlight is that in speaking with Mississippi recently, there have been 2 suspect positive deer in counties that are not far from our border near McNairy County. These are in Tippah and Alcorn counties. We are still waiting on confirmation on those, so those are not, those could still change. With that ends my presentation. Thank you very much for the opportunity and for taking the time to listen. I'd be happy to entertain questions if there's time.
Thank you, Stephanie. Commissioner Jim Ripley.
Stephanie, thank you very much. Welcome to Tennessee. Did I understand you're from Colorado?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the welcome. And yes, I was in Colorado for 20 years.
And you all invented CWD, didn't you, in Colorado?
I can definitely say I've been working with CWD since the year 2000. So I don't know about inventing, but it's not it's not a new thing for sure.
Well, we're sure glad to have you here, and thank you for that report. I want to commend the agency. That amount of sampling that we accomplished this year is absolutely fantastic. I think we're quickly getting a reputation as being, if not the leading state in the war against CWD, we're very, very close to the top. And I appreciate everything that y'all are doing. That represents a whole lot of work, and we've got a lot of work to do, but we're following the AFWA guidelines, and we're trying to do this right, and I think we're making progress. So again, thank you, Stephanie. Welcome aboard.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Sanders.
Stephanie, I want to echo Jim's statements. Thank you for coming on board, and sorry you had to bring CWD with you, but that's okay. How many, it's a Zoom function. How many people did you say, how many permits we had issued for the CWD management permit? It cut out right when you said it, or at least my hearing cut out.
Sorry for that. I'm sure it's a Zoom function. We have issued 120 plus, but that number is growing daily. Some of the officers have gotten calls from over 150 people. There is really strong support for the program and also for the concept of managing deer through decreasing density and additional harvest and take. So 120 so far, but that may even be different from yesterday because it's rising quickly.
And if I'm not mistaken, the permit goes through the 31st of March, so I'm assuming that landowners can apply for this all the way through the end of the period, correct?
That the end date is not specified in the policy. It's at the discretion of the county officer, and it's dependent on conditions in the area. So yeah, they'll be available just straight through the county officer, and they'll work with them directly on issuing those.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gardner?
Hello, Stephanie. I appreciate the briefing. That's fantastic. I've just got a couple of random questions. One of them is, when you're getting with the landowners and you're coordinating with them, is there a minimum acreage you're looking for when you do that, or is any size farm available for cooperation on this? It'd just be good to know.
That's a great question. I'm not sure if you're referring to the management permits or to the targeted removal.
I guess I was referring to the targeted removal, but I guess it's important for both, actually.
So there isn't a minimum for either program. Generally, we have reached out to landowners who have more than 10 acres for the targeted removal program. But if there are deer on the property and it would benefit management, then any property is eligible.
Okay, yeah, I think that's good for everybody to know that. And then the other question I have is some of our, refer to as sparks, are well outside of the concentrated area. Is there any kind of plan that would at one point remove that spark? Just say we get it under control, we do the targeted deer management, and let's say we're winning a little bit, and that you would reduce your area rather than keep expanding, and it's in there in perpetuity versus being able to back off of it at some point. Is there any chance that would happen, first of all, and secondly, if there is, how would you go about it?
So we are inherently responsive and adapting to changing conditions as we find out more about the disease and as we get more information from the targeted removal. I can't say for certain how we will address it because I can't anticipate how it will change, but I will say that generally targeted removal and decreasing densities is a long-term management strategy and is most effective when maintained for a long period of time. So although we will definitely be responsive as the conditions, prevalence, and location of the disease changes, it's inherently most effective when maintained long term.
Yeah, so I guess one of my points on that is some of those have only had one deer reported in a very distant area from the others. And if you went, let's just say 3 years without any deer reported with a positive CWD in that area, you would still remain with those counties in the CWD zone?
Well, we really have to manage our resources carefully. And if there are more significant areas that are showing the new leading edge of the infection, then we would be responsive in that way. And I anticipate that we would probably focus our efforts in that area. The biggest goal right now is to stop the spread. And so we would be dealing with it in those cases where if we're not seeing positives, and we do have adequate sampling, we feel confident in that, then I would anticipate that we would direct our resources to areas that need that more. Does that help? I know it's a little bit wishy-washy, but it's hard to anticipate. I can't hear, I'm sorry.
I went the wrong way with it. you never think you're going to win with this disease, but I mean, we're doing a lot of great things, and the potential is, and the goal is to battle it back a little bit. And you know, I just wondered if we would plan far enough ahead to say, hey, man, what if we do win? You know, what are we going to do? How are we going to back out of this thing? Or I don't know. It's probably pie in the sky, but I like to think that way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Any questions from the public or comment?
Yeah, Cart, this is David Salyers. Can you hear me?
Yes, Commissioner Salyers.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Sorry there, Chairman. I called you Cart, so.
That's
But,
everybody else does too when they're not, so it's fine.
Hey, no, I wanted, if staff or Chris Richardson could provide an update on the status of the incinerator.
Chris Richardson looks like he's going for the microphone.
I'm going for the microphone for the express purpose to thank David for his question and ask Steph if she would be willing to update us with the absolute latest. I know we have been working very diligently, and we are approaching in very short order getting a bid out on the street, or back out on the street to procure an incinerator, but Steph would have the latest information. I'd defer to her.
Stephanie?
Yes, so we are in the process of working the bid. We've been working with CPO and have released the bid specifications to the vendor pool and have received their feedback. This is going along in a slightly different process where the period for questions is actually part of the bid process. And so we are responding to those questions, and then we'll issue the formal bid by hopefully early next week, but middle of next week is probably a worst case scenario. So the specifications have been fully vetted, and we have feedback and communication with the vendor pool. So things are moving along as we would like.
And if I could, this is Salyers again, just a follow-up. Do we think we will have the incinerator in place by opening of deer season?
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Given commission, there's several people online, so I'm trying to wait to make sure nobody chimes in. Okay, thanks so much, Stephanie, for joining us. Thank you for that presentation.
Thank you very much.
All right, we're going to jump a little bit out of line here, and I'm going to go to Josh Campbell, our Region 2 Biodiversity Coordinator. He's going to give us an update on white nose syndrome in Tennessee.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to present information regarding white nose syndrome in the state. There it is. Oh, back. North American wildlife biologists have been dealing with white nose syndrome since it's first discovered in 2006. And since that discovery, almost 6.7 million bats have died as a result of white nose syndrome. Today, I'm just going to want to take the time to introduce you to white nose syndrome, tell you how it's impacting our bats, where it's found in the state, and then discuss the white nose syndrome grant, the grant opportunity that we get every year. All right, can you hit the next slide, please? So white nose syndrome is a disease caused by a fungal pathogen, Pseudogymnoascus destructans. And what it does is this fungus grows on the unfurred skin of bats. And you see here on the wings, the white fuzzy stuff, that's the fungus growing. as well as on the nose, where it gets its name from, white nose syndrome. It looks like two cotton balls growing there. And what the fungus actually likes to grow in cold, damp, and dark habitats, which are caves. Caves are ideal, so it's kind of a perfect storm with the bats and their immune systems being shut down, and this fungus likes those habitats where the bats are found. And what the fungus does is once it gets on the bats, it changes their behavior, and it increases their activity in the wintertime. Generally, bats are active, but it's very, very infrequently, and once they get the fungus on their skin and get an infection, the activity increases, so the arousal bouts are more frequent, and they burn through their stored fat. And that fat's necessary for them to survive the wintertime. And so ultimately what happens when they get the infections and they arouse more frequently, they end up succumbing to starvation or dehydration. And so, as I mentioned earlier, it was found in New York in 2006. This is indicated by the red X, and it quickly marched south and west. By 2010, it was in Tennessee, and it continued marching westward, and it's been found as far west as the state of Washington. So in just a matter of 10 to 12 years, it's found coast to coast. It's been found in 33 states and 7 Canadian provinces. And so this is what it looks like in Tennessee. It was first discovered in Upper East Tennessee in 2010, and by 2011, the next year, it was found as far west as Montgomery County. So it made a huge geographic jump here in Tennessee as well. And it's been documented, we've documented white nose or the fungus that causes white nose in 57 counties of the state. And in the state, that's about 74% of all the counties that contain caves. There's only 77 counties that contain caves, so we've documented it in 57 of those. So specifically about Tennessee caves, there's over 11,000 documented caves here in the state. That's 20% of the known caves that occur in the United States can be found in the state. So it's highly biodiverse with the number of caves Tennessee is, and it makes it very difficult on us to actually survey the caves because we can't get to 11,000 caves in a year. Our survey window is generally between January and March, and so it's very difficult to survey every cave. But to date, we've documented 143 caves in the state as white nose positive or suspect. Suspect means that's where we found the fungus, but we haven't observed or documented widespread infection in the bats. This is about 30% of the caves that we survey every year we see white nose in. So specifically talking about white nose in bats here in Tennessee, there's 16 species of bats here in the state, and white nose has been documented on 12 of those bats known to occur in Tennessee somewhere in their range. But specifically in Tennessee, we've actually documented white nose on 6 species here in the state through the efforts that we put forth. And unfortunately, we found it in 2 of the endangered species, Indiana bats and gray bats, as well as a threatened species, the northern long-eared bat. So what are those impacts that we're seeing here in the state? It varies by species. Here's a roost of Raffinese bigger bats. And for that species, white nose doesn't appear to affect those. Those numbers have been relatively stable over the last 10 to 12 years. But there have been declines for several species here in the state. And specifically talking, when I give you these declines here, I'm comparing 2010 observations for the state compared to 2020 observations. And so for tricolored bats, they've declined over 46% in the state since 2010 when it was first discovered. Tricolored bats are actually a species that we observe quite frequently. In 2010, they constituted, during each cave survey, averaged about 60 tricolored bats. Now in 2020, that number's less than 15. So each cave survey, we're seeing less than 15 animals per cave surveyed. Little brown bats, those numbers have declined almost 45%. This is pretty significant because this species generally roosts alongside with the Indiana bats, are one of our endangered species. And I should make note that these 2 species are actually up for consideration for listing as endangered species due to declines from white nose syndrome. Northern long-eared bats. This is a species that's been decimated by white-nose here in the state. Declines are almost 100%. In 2010, we observed about 300 individuals. In the last 2 to 3 years, the total observations for the state have ranged between 2 to 4 individuals in total. So we're rarely seeing this species during cave surveys. And then Indiana bats, those numbers have declined over 66%. And as I mentioned, this is an endangered species. And here in the state, we have 2 priority 1 caves as listed under the Indiana bats draft recovery plan. And one of those priority 1 sites, in 2013, the numbers were approximately 9,000 individuals during the cave survey. In 2019, that number was just barely over 700. So for that particular cave, the declines were in excess of 90%. But despite the declines, there have been some increases. Gray bats have increased almost 74% in the state, which is good for an endangered species. It's good for this species that they're increasing despite the presence of white-nose at many of their sites. And hopefully you can see this. We don't take a lot of high-dollar equipment in caves, so this is basically a cell phone picture. This is actually one cluster of gray bats at one of our priority sites here in the state. And this cluster is about 40 feet tall, 60 feet wide, and there's an estimated 300,000 individual bats in this cluster. And so when white-nose syndrome first hit the landscape in the United States, we were really worried about this species because they're highly social animals. As you can see here in this picture, they get really dense in clusters and a lot of individuals in a small area. And so we really were afraid that white-nose would really run its course with this species, and that's actually not been the case. So they've done really well. Just to reiterate how many gray bats there are now, most of the gray bats will winter in just 4 caves in the state. In 2019, the estimated population in Tennessee was over 1.3 million here in Tennessee. So in 4 caves, we count a lot of bats in a short period of time. So I want to kind of shift gears. Last month, Assistant Chief Upchurch presented a budget expansion for the white-nose syndrome grant. Kind of wanted to take some time to talk about this annual grant opportunity and how we utilize those funds. And so in 2020, our funds that we received were the highest that we've been awarded since we've been applying for this grant, and we utilized the funds in several different ways. We purchased a lot of equipment and for the surveys that we perform. There we go. So I apologize for the lag. So there's different ways we can utilize the funds from this grant. We can use it in the winter, we can use it in the summer. In the wintertime, since 2010, using these funds, we performed over 930 cave surveys in the state. We built a large data set for winter cave surveys. And we've had to, in order to do this many cave surveys, we have to buy a lot of equipment. And this grant has aided our ability to buy equipment. The decontamination protocols for white-nose syndrome is very harsh on equipment. Requires a lot of equipment to keep us, to allow us to not slow down, to have to decon quite often, but also to replace the equipment that's actually been lost as a result of decontamination. We've also utilized the funding for training. As you've seen from a few of the pictures, some of these sites are very technical. We've actually got biologists with the agency that actually use ropes to rappel down and rappel up to perform these surveys, and so we've utilized the funds to train the individuals or provide continuing education. But we've also been able to participate in a number of research projects that have been implemented here in the state. Our staff is knowledgeable, they're highly trained, and because we're highly equipped, we've been able to not only participate in research projects here that are implemented by state institutions, but also projects that are implemented at a regional and national level. So in the summertime, we utilize the funds to buy equipment to do summertime work, which consists of mist netting. You see here a back capturing the mist net. We've conducted over 300 mist net surveys, which is about well over 4,000 hours, mist net hours, and we've captured almost 2,000 individuals. That number may seem low, but the capture total for during the summertime since white-nose has been in Tennessee has actually declined tremendously. In some areas of the state, it used to take 5 net hours to catch a tricolor bat. Now it takes almost 100 hours. So it actually requires a lot of effort to capture some of these species of bats. And so the other thing that we use is harp trapping. And this is a picture of a harp trap placed in front of a cave entrance. During the summertime, we can, some of these caves actually harbor large numbers of gray bats, and so we can very quickly assess the health of these individuals, assess them for impacts from white-nose syndrome, because their wings will actually scar if they get infections. So we can very quickly assess these and capture large numbers. And over 30 harp trap sessions, we've captured over almost 4,000 individuals. And the last thing I wanted to talk to you about was a new thing that they put in the grant opportunity this past year is NA-BAT. They wanted the states to implement some version of NA-BAT, and that's the North American Bat Monitoring Program. And its big focus is with acoustics. It's something we haven't done a tremendous amount of here in the state, but we started this past year implementing acoustic surveys on our wildlife management areas. But the bigger part of the grant opportunity was we had to submit all the data that we've collected for bats, and that's across all seasons, historical, past, and moving into the future. And I kind of wanted to show you this because it kind of iterates the amount of work that's been done. Hopefully when the clicker catches up, I apologize. As of December, the amount of data that we've submitted ranks Tennessee as number 1 in this program for the winter data that we've submitted. And that kind of indicates that we have one of the top winter cave survey databases in the country. We're number 1 in actually the emergence count, so the summer bat emergences, and overall we're number 4 for total data contribution to this program in just a short period. So it kind of reiterates how much work's being done for bats and white-nose syndrome here in the state. And lastly, I can't give a presentation about white-nose without discussing the number of partners and partnerships we've developed over the last 10 or 12 years. A lot of this work couldn't be done without the folks associated with these agencies, and we're very grateful for that. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Josh. Any questions from the commission? Commissioner Ripley?
At the risk of talking too much, Josh, you know, bats get a bad rap.
Yes,
but
sir.
As I understand it, one of the reasons that we're so interested in their health and well-being is that they are a very important part of our ecology. Is that correct?
That's correct. They provide a large number of ecosystem services for us.
Yeah, including insect control, like mosquitoes and other harmful insects.
Yes,
I
sir.
understand.
Agricultural pests.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your hard work on that.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Gardner?
Yeah, Josh, thanks for the presentation, and I agree with Commissioner Ripley. It's not a glamorous animal, but it's so vital to everything else that we love to do. The more glamorous things of, you know, from your turkey hunting to your deer hunting, it all plays a part, and bats are a big part of that. And I appreciate the work y'all put into it, and it shows, it's evident in your ranking on the national bat program that you're on, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
What's a harp trap?
Harp trap. It's something biologists invented several years ago, and it's actually, if you're familiar with the harp, the musical instrument, it's designed after that. And so it's 2 rows of monofilament fishing line that are offset. So when a bat's flying, it misses the first piece of monofilament, but the one in the back actually catches it, and it spirals down into a bag at the bottom. So it functions, and it's constructed like the musical instrument, and works. It's highly effective capturing bats.
Chairman Holbert's quite an accomplished harpist, so I was just curious. Thank you.
The rest of us knew what that was. That's why I couldn't figure out why you were asking. I thought you knew. Anyways. Anyone else? Thank you, Josh, very much. All right, we're gonna take about a 15-minute break. We're gonna come back in and start at 2:10. We're gonna go back into chronic waste, but let's take a 15-minute break.
Mr. Chairman, that's 2:10 fast time?
Eastern time. we'll call the meeting back to order. I'm going to recognize Commissioner Hank Wright. We're just going to discuss chronic wasting disease modeling. Proposals on the agenda, but that's not the right word. I don't think, Hank, Commissioner Wright, you can correct me, but anyways, you asked for some discussion. That's what we're doing. So.
Thank you, Chairman Holbert. How's my volume? Could you give me some advice on that?
You're good, Hank.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just want to thank you, Chairman Holbert, my fellow commissioners, the agency personnel, and the public, the stakeholders, just for this time. And just to clarify, as Chairman Holbert said, it's more of I'd like this to be just an educational, healthy discussion on what predictive mathematical disease modeling may or may not be able to bring to us with regard to management of CWD and slow of that spread. Just a brief word about how we got here. You know, I think I have some training on prion diseases, including CWD, and a little bit of knowledge about mathematical disease modeling, and through discussion responsibilities, of course. But in talking to Commissioner Jones, found out that he had some real world experience with, in the last year, just educating myself, reading scientific studies about what all of us have that health that could speak a lot more intelligent. With that, quickly just Wright, a whole bunch of things right. And I want to compliment the agency, our staff, surveillance effort, and that's creating a wonderful data point. But it's almost a tracking data point. We have that data, and it's what I would call not so actionable, meaning we know where there was positive dose identified, but what do we do with that data? And then what do we do with the data? Like we have a doe that tests positive in a particular area, and that creates an outlying area, and that creates a spark. We talk about treating those sparks, but do we really know what radius we need to treat? And do we know how the time from identification of that positive doe to the time of treatment affects the size of that radius? And is it really a radius? It's probably not. It's probably not a circle based on geographical and cover, deer density, natural boundaries like lakes, rivers, interstates, etc. It's probably never a circle. And so can we use mathematical modeling and perhaps overlay that with some mapping capabilities at Oak Ridge National Laboratory to plug in some of those data points and really tell us what are the areas we need to treat, what's the shape. And maybe we could also learn from that, if we don't get a particular percentage of landowner participation in a particular spark, that it's not worth treating. And I think that, you know, Steph Karns mentioned that we have limited resources. We have the limited ability to treat all of them. So what if we had a model, and a computer model, that would tell us, don't do that one, concentrate your research or your efforts on deer removal at this one. And I think also that if the computer model could tell us exactly what area to treat, something would be accomplished that none of us are talking about, and that is, let's remove every deer that's necessary, but let's don't remove any deer that are unnecessary. And let's save those resources if we don't need to remove them, and treat the sparks that'll really give us a return. We may not have adequate landowner participation in a particular spark. It's just not worth treating. So that's kind of what I'm after, and the discussion I want to have. And I think we'll wait till Dr. Pfefferman and Dr. Miller present to ask them questions rather than me, I think. And then we can all have a healthy discussion, if that's okay. I'll just read the bio really quick, but I'll send everybody this. First, Dr. Deb Miller is the Interim Director of the UT One Health Initiative and the Director of the UT Center for Wildlife Health. She's a professor with a split appointment between the Department of Forestry, Wildlife, and Fisheries and the College of Veterinary Medicine here in Tennessee. She has a Bachelor of Science from the University of Wisconsin at Stevens Point, and also a Master of Science, a Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, and a PhD from Mississippi State University. She's a certified wildlife biologist and a veterinary pathologist. She used her training in wildlife and veterinary medicine to investigate wildlife health issues that are impacting species in Tennessee and beyond. And then Dr. Nina Pfefferman, who's also zooming in. is the Director of Mathematical Modeling Consulting Center. She's the Associate Director of the One Health Initiative at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, where she is also a professor in both departments of ecology and evolutionary biology and mathematics. Her research uses mathematical modeling to explore the behavior, evolution, and control of complex systems with application in areas from basic science, evolutionary sociobiology, and epidemiology to deployable technology, biosecurity, cybersecurity, and wildlife conservation. Dr. Pfefferman's been an active member of the National Institute of Mathematical and Biological Synthesis and Command and Control and Interoperability Center for Advanced Data Analysis, a Department of Homeland Security Center of Excellence. She has served on scientific advisory panels, boards for the EPA, Mathematical Biosciences Institute, and the Los Alamos National Laboratories, and regularly consults to government agencies and private companies. Her work has been funded by the NSF, NIH, DHS, DOD, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, and USDA. Dr. Pfefferman is passionate about disease prevention and public health, and about communicating the utility and beauty of mathematics as a tool to make people's lives better. So with that, any order is fine with me. Dr. Pfefferman, Dr. Miller, if you guys would just tell us a little bit about what you do and how you, I think you've got some kind of knowledge about what we're doing within the agency and the commission to battle CWD, but what do you see as things you could bring to the table to augment this and make us more effective?
Thank you, Hank. I'll go ahead and start if that's okay. And I want to thank the chairman and everyone for inviting us here today. This is wonderful. As everybody knows, CWD is obviously a huge issue for the state. And the one thing I want to impress upon everybody present today, moving forward, we're just here to help however we can. So we want to work with you. We, you know, if there's a need for us, and just please always keep that in mind. My background, as you heard, is in wildlife health. So as a biologist and as a veterinarian, and I like to look at how the environment, the plants, the animals, and of course the human factors all interconnect in any health issue. And CWD is a prime example of this. And so with that, I'm actually going to not take up any more of Dr. Pfefferman's time, because I know that this is what you guys want to hear about, is the modeling. Dr. Pfefferman.
Okay, thank you so much. I'd like to echo what Dr. Miller just said, and also very much to thank all of you, especially Hank and Steve for speaking with me about these things. As Dr. Miller said, my goal is to see if I can be helpful, and the work that we can do can complement the already very stellar work that's being done within the agency and by the researchers working with you. So some of whom are on this call, and so I very much want to take a moment to say the work that you guys are doing is fantastic, and I'm showing up here today to see if I can help, because there's a lot to do. So if it's okay, I'll share just one or two quick slides of overview. I think Hank was nice enough to mention already some of the things I'll talk to you about. Let's see, let me see if that's, hopefully, I can get this to, hopefully you guys have a slide that says decision support management. Awesome, okay. So really, the question from my end is just, I'm a mathematical modeler. I'm a very applied mathematical modeler. I find beauty in the questions, but my real goal is to help with very utilitarian, pragmatic, and cost-effective decision-making in any system that I work in. And so for chronic wasting disease, specifically in Tennessee, I think through some really great conversations and some help that we've been given, really very welcoming environment, thank you. I think I understand what you guys have been doing, and I think it's awesome. And I think here are the ways that some additional mathematical modeling might be useful. There are really three main thrusts. The first one, I think, is to sort of complement and build out something from the context of what would be called adaptive management. So in adaptive management, right, as you learn more information, you change which strategy is most responsive to the information that you know. And that's already being done really beautifully for some of the CWD work. What hasn't yet been done, and what I think could help build that forwards, is to increase a component of adaptive data gathering. So instead of asking, what are the most important things to know, what you ask is, given the state of the world right now, given my current knowledge, both the knowns and unknowns, so what are the things I know and can say, okay, these are current threats, or these aren't, or right now there are infected deer in this region, or over here there are not, versus here is a place where I don't have any information about that. I might be able to infer some good information from what else I know, but I don't know. So I can quantify both what I do know and what I don't know. And then based on that, which piece of information will be most cost effective, most valuable in the available decisions that I can make next. And so it's moving into that very, instead of taking a large scale approach and saying, here is a strategy, it's saying, what are my available strategies over time, when they are effective to switch, and then what information will best inform my next step instead of my global strategy. So as I was looking at some of what you guys were doing, I thought maybe that could help, and that's some modeling that's very straightforward to do. It relies a little bit on information theory, a little bit on risk analysis, and a little bit on some ordinary differential equations. And then, so then the next piece, and that's work we could do sort of in-house. That's work that we can work with you guys and say, we've got this, we can complement what you're doing and work together directly and provide that. The next one is work that I think Hank had mentioned some beautiful work being done already at Oak Ridge National Labs. So this next piece, the second one, is a collaboration that I can envision between the ongoing work already for some of the interstate work that's been being done on chronic wasting disease and management, some work that we could do in-house at the One Health Initiative at UT, and in collaboration with some of the work that's being done to map with the spatial and remote sensing of Tennessee that's being done at Oak Ridge, and some of the ecological modeling that they have in response to that. To move some of the projection models that are currently being developed and deployed specifically into the topographic landscape and the known patterns of movement of animals in Tennessee. And so that's very much taking the existing work that's being built and integrating it together rather than building something independent or starting from scratch. And then the very last piece, sorry, I should describe what that should do. It's on the slide. But ideally, if done well, what that would mean is that we could not only give a good map of the current understanding of where CWD is, but a probabilistic map of projections. You could think of them like likely flood zone mapping, likely hurricane trajectories, where you don't know with 100% certainty this is what's going to happen, but you're able to provide across a map over time the probabilities of spread of CWD, and that can also inform where you would go and measure, or where surveillance efforts would happen next. So that could play very much with also the first part. So while I'm presenting these as three separate pieces, and they could be done independently from each other, they also synergize really well in terms of decision support in order to inform how we would think about making very cost-effective, pragmatic decisions. And so it's also, I keep saying cost-effective because in my mind, all of us know exactly what to do if we were given infinite resources. That's pretty clear. The real challenge in the real world is to go, okay, here's how much effort we've got, here's how much money we've got, here's how quickly we think we can do these things and how well. And then to make the best, to figure out what those compromised decisions are by the constraints of reality. How we can make the best decisions in reality. And that's also the focus of this third part. So this third part, as Hank had mentioned, is specifically incorporating the idea that there may be patchy access, either by ownership and cooperation, or just by ease of physical access itself, of a landowner saying, sure, go there, but it takes an extra day to set up to be able to test in that region. Or it's very expensive to get there. Or the tests themselves are difficult to deploy well. That patchiness can move what would be a truly optimal scenario in terms of intervention into the realm of such compromise that it's no longer even the 5th or 6th best option. And so building some models that can really take into account all of the sort of compromise of the real world, including discontinuous landscapes. What happens if this patch right in the middle, which is only 10% of the land, but is cutting right through the trail path that deer would take, how much does that compromise our understanding if we can't get any information about what's happening at that 10% of the land? Or separately, there's 70% of the land we can't have access to, but we can monitor really well around it, and therefore everything that's happening inside what seems to be a majority of a black box, we can get a good handle on. Those are two scenarios that highlight really well how compromised reality and constraint can really change what kind of sense we get from surveillance efforts, and then what kind of predictions we can build from modeling. But we have some really great tools developed through risk analysis and game theory that don't necessarily assume perfect information, that together with some of the other epidemiological models we can use to understand how compromised differential access and ease and cost can make these strategies, and then how to pick the best strategy given the constraint, and whether or not those constraints include economic constraint. So put together, I think all three of these would be a really nice package together to build out in terms of the modeling capabilities, the practical and informational and capability perspectives. But any one of them, I think, might be able to help complement some of the excellent work already going on to help really bolster practical strategic management. So that's what I prepared to explain to you guys. I'm happy. I'd love to go into the mathematical details. I'm used to that not being what everyone wants in a first conversation.
And can I just add to that as we're doing this, we need to simultaneously be collecting information about the deer biology, the what's going on in the environment, and all of that then can work together to hopefully combat this. And while you're gathering this information, we want to be coming up with management strategies too, which I know you all have probably already been told about, and all of this has been in discussion because Dr. Grove has, I know, has communicated to you all the needs to look at management of the environment and then movement of deer and the genetics.
Thank you. Yes, definitely. Just to echo that, I am a modeler, and I think modeling is wonderful. But it's only, of course, one tool in the toolkit that's needed, and of course, all of the empirical work and the measurements and the understanding. Neither one function perfectly without the other, but none of the models function at all without that empirical understanding.
Commissioner Jones.
Thank you, Dr. Pfefferman, Dr. Miller. Just kind of give you an overview. I became familiar with the importance of predictive modeling several years ago when I was working with a government agency, and they were looking at livestock genomics. And actually, I met an individual at Oak Ridge National Lab by the name of Dr. Paul Gilna, who was a professor in the same field that Dr. Pfefferman's in, that was from Scotland, and it actually helped lead the mad cow disease crisis in the UK, kind of lead them out of that crisis using predictive modeling techniques. I became acquainted with predictive modeling again a few years later when I was doing some pro bono work related with the VA associated with PTSD, because I lost a couple friends to PTSD, and was, in talking with the VA folks in Washington, D.C., I was surprised to find out that they were doing predictive modeling. That was their main tool in their tool chest, and it was circling back to the computational capabilities at Oak Ridge National Lab, and they were using those. They were developing management tools to make predictions about the disease and who it may impact, and trying to come up with measurables that could be used to help manage that crisis in our country. And then we've seen it most recently being utilized in the COVID crisis, where they've taken data that they had, put it into the computational resources that we have in Tennessee to narrow down the search for vaccines and the way that virus reacts to people and populations and that type of thing. And so because of all those things, from my first meeting, I've been on the commission for a couple of years, and from my first meeting, listening to an update about chronic wasting disease, I knew that there was a place for this tool in our toolkit to better manage this disease. So, a lot of things have happened. Director Carter was certainly supportive of it. Then we had COVID, and he retired, and Director Wilson and I had a discussion about it, and he asked me to coordinate with Assistant Director Maxidon. And the COVID has made social interaction so tough. The ideal situation would have been to maybe have a commission meeting somewhere around the Knoxville area and get the commissioners into Oak Ridge so you could actually see the supercomputer capabilities and how they are able to make a lot of calculations at one time and give you predictable data based on what we have and what we're collecting. So after talking to Director Wilson, I tried to make a connection with Dr. Gilna, and he too retired in the middle of COVID. And his office actually sent me to Dr. Miller and Dr. Pfefferman's office. And after listening to them, I felt like that the information that they had might be of value to the agency to help us manage chronic wasting disease a little bit better. And then when you look back over the last year and the expenditures that we've had to put out there for chronic wasting disease, we could actually add another layer, another level, a more technical level to the management, something instead of trial and error or a knee-jerk reaction to something that's going on out in the field. We can actually put together a diagnostic tool that tells us if we're making better decisions or if there's a better decision that we could make for a fraction of what we're already spending to help try to control the disease. And so that's, I appreciate Dr. Miller and Dr. Pfefferman for taking the time to present to us, and I appreciate Commissioner Wright for bringing it to our attention, and I appreciate the commission taking the time to listen to them present. And I hope it opens up some questions and some additional dialogue.
All right. Any questions? Commissioner Sanders?
And I'm not sure if this is, I guess it may be directed to Jason. I'm not sure. And I too want to thank both Dr. Miller and Dr. Pfefferman for their discussion and presentation. How does this work with what we're doing now? Does this layer on top of it? Is it? I'm trying to understand, and I may be wrong. I think it was a slide that was up when Dr. Pfefferman was speaking, because I think the number I saw was 955,000 total. I'm sorry, I'm a financial guy. That's where my mind goes first.
No.
Sure.
Hold on just a second, please. I'm going to let Jason. Jason, will you answer the first part of that? I know the funding.
455. I think it was 455. Right,
Okay.
Dr. Pfefferman?
Was okay.
All right, but the first part of the question, if she needs to comment, I'll let her do that. That way we don't get back and forth. Because on Zoom and in person, it's going to get difficult going back and forth. But if
So Commissioner Sanders, you're asking what kind of research that we're involved in and maybe how this would play into it?
I'm asking how this correlates, models, works with, I'm sorry, I stayed in the West and I didn't stay in another chain. You know, so I'm trying to just make sure I understand how this all works with what we're doing.
Good question. And I'd like to call on Chuck Yost, our CWD coordinator. And just so you all know, our team has been working with Dr. Miller and Dr. Pfefferman. And so we've been in some talks about this, but I think it'd be better if Chuck, if you would, you can call anybody on your team that's on Zoom and just kind of explain our research needs and how this would play into that, if you would, please.
Yeah, thank you, and good afternoon, commissioners, and thank you, partners, for being so interested in your support in CWD management. We need the support, and we're appreciative of it. You know, in regards to research, funding for CWD research is very limited, and then also there's, you know, limitations as far as manpower within the agency. And if funding was not limited for research, we do have some additional projects that we're interested in, and we do have a current modeling project that we refer to as the CWD, or excuse me, SOP for CWD. So that's a modeling project and actually can be expanded. And as far as other projects that we're interested in, without going into detail about those, and we can do that, Mr. Chairman, if you so desire it. Steph Karns has the details prepared to share. But those projects, one is regarding learning more about deer ecology in the CWD affected area. That's our primary interest. And then information gained from that would help inform modeling and increase our modeling capabilities. We're certainly interested in a project like that. More specifically regarding modeling, we've been in conversations for quite some time, months now, with all the parties represented here about modeling possibilities. And we have identified a project that would be helpful to our management. It's not our primary interest. However, there is some value to be gained there, and we have a loose proposal for that. And we refer to that project as optimizing targeted removal. And again, we can share more about that, but that's the highlights of where we are on this subject. And I do want to address one other thing, though, before I close, that I hope the commission isn't under any impression that our management actions are a knee-jerk reaction. We're very thoughtful about these, and I feel like you guys understand that. And if we need to sit down and further explain our management and share the supporting information with you so that you're more confident in that, we're available. So thank you.
Does that answer your question, Commissioner Sanders? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I might just want to clarify. Knee-jerk reaction may have been the wrong terminology to use there. That's just my farm boy dictionary coming out there. The agency actually, when I contacted Director Wilson and he sent me to Assistant Director Maxidon, the agency actually hosted the first interaction with the folks there at UT, and there were some Oak Ridge National Lab, and there were some other specialties on the call. So the TWRA has been very proactive in listening to these discussions and putting them together. So they're very involved. I didn't mean to leave agency personnel out when I was kind of going through the quick timeline.
Is that Commissioner Granberry down there?
Connie's birthday and she acts up. You know.
Oh, it's Connie. Commissioner Ripley.
Chuck, are you still with us? Yeah, I see you barely up there in the corner of the screen. You referred to a program, Optimizing Targeted Removal. Is that a mathematical modeling scheme that we are working on right now? Or is that something, I didn't understand what you said about that. I wrote it down, but I didn't fully understand what you were saying about that.
Yeah, no, sir. That is a project that we could add with funding, and it's one that aligns that we believe, the agency believes, aligns best with what Commissioner Wright is interested in, and Commissioner Jones. You know, they've shared their interest, and we've been in discussion with UT and Oak Ridge. And from an agency perspective, we feel like that's the most we have, or that's the project that we could gain the most from, and utilizing all the parties here in such a project, we believe would bring the most benefit, aside from the deer ecology project. That's another potential project that would be our highest interest. However, the optimizing CWD or targeted removal would also be a beneficial project.
I think everybody here is interested in giving you whatever tools you think you need. Is this something that you would want to look some more at and then give us a presentation in a couple, 4 or 5 months on what you think its benefit will be, and if it is a tool that you need?
I'd be glad to, Commissioner, but I defer back to Chief Benedict and the Director's Office on next steps.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Jason?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Ripley, we'll put that together and get back to you. Give us a couple of months. We're busy with our CWD work now, and our team is pretty well tied up with the targeted removal, but we'll come back with that proposal if you'd like to see something on that.
Yeah, I understand what I'm suggesting here is that it just an initial word to us. It's something we want, or it's something that we feel like we've already got, or we're doing it another way. If it's something that you feel like it's going to be a tool that you need in your toolbox, then let us know that.
Will do. Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Commissioner Wright, I'm gonna let you end it since it started with you, and make sure I'm gonna give you the last word on it. So I think we're done with questions here.
Just had a question for Chuck, just surrounding the deer ecology study. I'd be really interested in that as soon as we can get a look at that, what data we'll get out of it, and then how we're going to be able to use that data in an actionable format or form. I really think that 4 or 5 months is a little bit long because we're up against the timeline and we keep identifying different sparks in different counties. I'd really love to see the agency work with UT and possibly Oak Ridge to come up with a proposal to bring back to us. Hey, we've all collaborated. Here's the data points the agency is gathering. Here's what we think mathematical modeling can do for us, and tailor our response. And bring that back to us maybe next meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Wright. And I'm going to defer back to the chair here, but Steph Karns, she's prepared to give you a less than 5-minute description on the optimizing targeted removal. So I would recommend that opportunity for her. However, I understand for the sake of time, you may not be able to do it this time.
Thank you, Chuck. First, I'm going to put Deputy Director Maxidon on the spot and ask that you come back next month at the meeting with as much information as you can and your stance or how you guys feel on it.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask if it would be possible to come back in the month of March with a proposal on that? We'll make it happen next month.
As soon as you can. If you can make it happen in February, it'd be great. So if not.
Thank you, sir.
does Stephanie, we can't hear really good on that Zoom, so I don't know
If she has some information on that, we call them pocket slides, that she could share if you wanted to see that. She can share
Okay.
that with you today.
Is that beneficial, or would you rather wait and do that when you do that?
Let's wait. I think it will help with the discussion next month. And
Okay.
We'll bring that to you at that time.
Okay, all right, sounds good. Any other questions?
I'm good, Mr. Chairman. I think if we get something by March, that would be fantastic. CWD is one of those things that keeps me awake at night, so.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Miller and Dr. Pfefferman, for both joining us, and thank you, Commissioner Wright. We're going to move right along, and we're going to go to our Chief of Fisheries, Frank Fiss. I know Tim Broadbent's watching somewhere, Frank, going, the chairman has let the fisheries down. He's put us last. So anyway.
As noted, for sure. But thanks for the opportunity to speak this afternoon anyway, Chairman and Commissioners. We're on the, I'm going to get my slides up here, I'm getting ahead of them. We're on the banks, practically on the banks of the Tennessee River, so I think it would be a really good opportunity to talk about our long-term Lake Sturgeon project, and it's a project that we work with the Chattanooga Aquarium on as well, so it's a good location to talk about it. The fish in this picture here is 5 feet long, about 50 pounds, and it was caught last month somewhere in Loudon. It's part of this ongoing effort. So it's an interesting story. I feel like it's unlike a lot of our projects. This is almost a multi-generational project because it's going to take so long to really restore the species. Lake sturgeon are long-lived. They can live up to 150 years in some cases. They get huge, 8 feet, 300 pounds. And it's this life strategy that has made them vulnerable to over-harvest and some other issues. These long-lived species are some of the more delicate on the planet when it comes to being able to resist change. This is the species that we want to bring back. It's a native species to Tennessee. The reason they're not here anymore is a few reasons. One, overexploitation. There was no limit on them for years. There was commercial fishery for them. I think that the habitat alteration that occurred in the 40s and 50s with all the dam construction went a long way to taking their habitat away and how the water was managed. And water pollution, we're pretty lucky right now to be fisheries biologists when most of our work is to work on sport fish and maybe other problems as well, but at least it's not water pollution. Years ago, most of the work that fisheries managers did was responding to fish kills, and that's not the case anymore, so we're pretty lucky about that. So that's what happened to the sturgeon. This is their road to recovery, the things that happened that really positively affected them. They were listed as endangered, so they were protected in Tennessee. The Clean Water Act, of course, came in and cleaned up the waterways, making their habitat safe for them. And TVA did a lot of work on their water release schedules in the late 80s that really brought back a lot of species, not just sturgeon. Some of their tailwaters, they noted that they were getting a lot of native species returning. So that got biologists thinking in 1998 that maybe things have recovered enough that we can add this large species back into the mix. So that's when this project started. It was over 20 years ago. And these are all the groups that are involved in this project. It's, of course, all the states in the Tennessee Valley, then Cumberland Valley, and our partners at the aquarium, TVA. And the goal of the project is to have self-sustaining sturgeon back in these rivers in Tennessee to the point where we can have some recreational harvest of them even. That's what we would ultimately like to see. So even though they're listed as endangered now in the state, we'd like to see them in our sport fishing regulations someday. This is the zone that we're working in, the Tennessee Cumberland Basin. And it's, the tool that we have that we are using is releasing stocked fish. So there's the Wolf River up there in Michigan. Wisconsin is where the crew goes to get those fish. The Fish and Wildlife Service from Warm Springs, Georgia, sends their team up there to along the bank of the river to harvest eggs and create fry to young fish to bring back to Warm Springs to grow out and to share with their other hatcheries in the federal system to put more, we don't have all our eggs in one basket that way, and they have more space to produce fish. You'll also notice that the aquarium takes some of those fish as well to rear them. Another hatchery in Genoa sends fish directly to Tennessee Wildlife, which we keep at the Cumberland River Aquatic Center there in Gallatin. Those fish get reared over the summer, and then in the fall, all of the fish that are at all the hatcheries get marked, and they all come back to Tennessee in the Tennessee and Cumberland rivers. And lately, each year, they're stocking about 30,000 fish across the whole basin. There's some that go into upper river, I guess upper French Broad in North Carolina, up in Kentucky, but probably 80% of the fish end up in the Tennessee River sections in Tennessee and Cumberland. So that's, of course, we put them out there, we want to know how they're doing, and they've been at, I think Bobby was telling me today, he was at one of the very first stockings back in 2000 when the first fish were getting released. We've done a lot of research on, most of the work we've done is on movements, where are these fish moving, what kinds of habitat do they like, are they going through the locks back and forth, and they are. And this research is interesting to me because it's developed some of our staff. Two of the people on these research projects, Will Collier and Eric Gaines, are two people in our fisheries staff that got their master's degrees working on sturgeon projects over the years. But aside from the more high science research side of it, we also go out annually in December to track these fish that have been released. We know how old they are by how they're marked, and they run dozens of overnight 50-hook trot lines, basically, to catch these fish and release them once we're done inspecting them. So in a typical, to date, they've handled 550 lake sturgeon, and in the Cumberland, we're not done as well, but we don't feel like we're as successful at sampling up there either, but we have handled some fish. So it's neat to see these fish are going in, and we can see all the cohorts that have been released are showing up again. So we have evidence that these fish are growing. And we also get help from anglers. It specifies in the fishing guide that you cannot harvest a sturgeon, but you can, and we encourage you to let us know if you catch a lake sturgeon. And if they do, they tell us where and when they caught it, maybe how they, 62 reports, fish, and big, or something you've never, like for the developers of the 20 years worth of fish beyond, we'd like to see them in all the suitable habitats. That means just all the reservoirs that could have them. The geneticists have helped us determine that we need at least 500 of these fish out there to keep the population going and looking good. So with that, I'll take any questions. This is a shot from their sampling last month. Questions? I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks, Frank. I think the commission would have a better understanding if you could take us all out and catch one.
Well,
make us understand it a lot better.
If you go with the crew, they usually every boat usually catches one. And that offer is always there for commissioners. It's a wintertime sample, but it's a fun one. There's a lot of people involved. And it's not just our staff, it's people from the Fish and Wildlife Service and the aquarium and University of Tennessee typically come out for those Tennessee River samples.
Any questions, Frank?
Okay, thank you.
But that was too quick.
Got a question?
Are you getting any other reports, Frank, just on other wintertime species? I'll call them wintertime species. I know we have a lot of walleye and sauger fishermen.
People are definitely fishing for sauger. I saw some of them yesterday. There's been reports that Pickwick was fishing pretty well. Somebody had some nice walleye below Pickwick, which is a result of our recent stockings down there. We're doing, I think, 40,000 a year down there. I'm not fishing enough to really have a great report for you, unfortunately.
Right. And I've had some people send some pictures of walleye from Pickwick, and they're really really excited about them being there. But the sauger bite seems to be really good too, so it's a good thing. So just a shout out to your guys in each region. But the other day it was 3 o'clock and it looked like the whole West Tennessee Fisheries crew. It literally, every vehicle we had. And they weren't going toward their home base, but the weather was nice that day. I know they were out doing their sampling, and those guys worked some long hours trying to get it all done on the days that are suitable, and we just appreciate them. I want them to know that, and appreciate what you do too.
Well, thank you.
Chairman Holbert, I have a question.
Okay.
Well, Commissioner King.
Thank you. I was waiting for Commissioner Ripley to pick this up because I thought he would catch it. But Commissioner Woods and I are confused down here about one of the, on the slides it said the males of the sturgeon spawn so many times a year and the female spawn so many times a year. I don't get that connection. How does that work, please?
It's just staggered. The individual fish, it's not as a population, it's individuals will build up reserves or build up eggs and be able to spawn every few years, not every year like a lot of species do. It works for them. They live a long time, so they can do that. If they were shorter lived species, that would be a big problem.
So a portion of the males will spawn a certain time of year and a portion of the females will spawn something?
Well, they're all spawning at the same time, we hope. And then, but the ones in the population that participate are different depending on where they are developmentally.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Any comment from the public? All right. Thanks, Frank.
Thank you, Chairman.
Commissioner Sanders, while we're talking about fisheries, I'll let you introduce a local person that you want to recognize while we're here.
I wanted to recognize Richard Sims. Richard's been writing in the area for, I don't know, 30 years, whatever. He worked for the agency before, owns, I don't know, do you have the largest charter or fishing charter service now with all your guides? You got 6 or 7 guides now, so. So there's 7 guides. I mean, they really have a lot of people on the water, and I really appreciate that. Richard's, he's a cheerleader, but he also holds us accountable. And luckily, some of the conversations we have don't ever make it public because he really holds us accountable. But I just wanted to recognize him. You know, you suggested it, and I agree. What he does to help promote the outdoors, and Richard, so just wanted to recognize you while you're down here with us today.
Thank you, Commissioner Sanders.
Can I
and I'll
recognize
echo that opinion.
someone else real quick?
Absolutely.
And I don't want to forget it. Last week we had another unfortunate drowning here in Chattanooga. And I just want to recognize the guys that are out there, the law enforcement guys.
Absolutely.
I'm telling you, last Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, it was bitter on the water. The wind was blowing. It was white caps. It was in the 40s. And these guys are out there for 3 days to bring closure to this family. And I appreciate what they do. And I had the privilege of texting back and forth with, I'm not even going to recognize, one of the guys that was out on the water. And they're using the ROV that we purchased a couple of years ago. So I was glad to see that almost $300,000 item being used to help bring closure to a family, to a very tragic situation. But man, they're out there on a holiday weekend, bitter weather, just constantly trying to find someone that has unfortunately drowned. And but I really appreciate what those guys do. And I know, Kurt, you were at Pickwick last year when they were looking for those 3 fishermen. And it's amazing what our people do that people don't even think about that. Just a couple of years ago, they were spent almost a week or so looking for a plane that had crashed in the river. And it just in December. And so these guys I appreciate the ladies and the gentlemen of the law enforcement and what they do all the time. And I just hope that they know what they do. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sanders. Very well said. You brought up Pickwick, and that choked me up. But I heard my son said the other day when this happened up on Chick, he said, Dad, I can't imagine what those guys that are working for TWRA go through when they actually, when they find the body. I mean, it's a dim outlook, but yet it's a peace because they're bringing closure to that family. We got some gifted employees. That's all I'm going to say, and I appreciate each one of them. All right, I'm going to call on Ken Tarkington, our Budget and Procurement Chief. Have you got your history lesson on Chattanooga with you?
Well, I do. Would you like to hear it? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a 2-page in your booklet or on your iPad, and there's going to be one up here too. I'm reporting through the month of November for the fiscal year of 21, FY21. At the top of the page, the boating fund is approximately $376,000 ahead of the projected amount for registration income for the year. The expense to total is approximates 25% of the budget for the year. Middle of the page, the wildlife fund, the license income is $147,000 ahead of projection, and the expense is 30% of the allotment of the year. At the bottom of the first page, the wetlands acquisition fund has approximately $15.5 million as a balance. And then on the second page, our Treasury investments, along with the balance that's invested in SPIF, that's a State Pool Investment Fund, the year-to-date earnings in the investment is about 1/3% less than what we started with in July, and the state pool, SPIF, is approximately 0.2% for the month. Any questions or comments?
Commissioner Sanders, you only got one meeting left. You don't have any
Well,
questions?
I'm saving it up
Okay.
for the February meeting. I'm going to have, I'm going to try to wrap up all those first 2 years of questions I had when I was on the Finance Committee to ask all of those at once.
Any questions for Ken? Comment from the public? All right. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comment, commissioners, or announcements? I would like to announce to the commission, as you know, we're going into executive session after this meeting, so if you would all stick around, and we'll let the public clear out, and we'll be in executive session for just a few minutes. Then we'll be back in session tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Invite you all to join us back here at that time. Thank you again. We're adjourned.